I've always felt different, but I didn't really understand why. I feel like this isn't talked about enough, and this is something that I wish those of us who are HSPs knew from the very beginning and be able to communicate it with the people in your life. I've been reading a book called The Highly Sensitive Person in Love. It's written by Elaine and Aron. She is a psychotherapist who has been studying HSPs, highly sensitive people, since the 90s. She's one of the first who's ever written about it. She herself identifies as an HSP, and her work helped bring attention to the innate personality trait, because an HSP is not a mental health disorder, nor is it a personality disorder. It is a personality trait. Aron's research revealed that 15 to 20% of the population are more sensitive to external stimuli, deeply processed experiences, and are more emotionally responsive. Her work has since become the foundation for understanding HSPs, particularly on how sensitivity affects relationships, emotions, and daily life. I've been obsessing over learning about highly sensitive people because I am one, and I feel like this isn't talked about enough, and this is something that I wish those of us who are HSPs knew, because I feel like it would help us understand ourselves and our environment and how and why we react the way we do. Here are the 10 things that I learned about being an HSP: where you live, the city, the region, the landscape, your home, how it feels inside, if it's quiet, cozy, calming, peaceful. All of those things matter. I was born in LA, grew up in a suburb, so it wasn't exactly overstimulating, but I would say it's still definitely a busy area. Now I live in Seattle. I moved to Washington about 6.5 years ago. I didn't know that this is exactly what I needed, because I wasn't aware that I was an HSP. Before I found this apartment, I lived in about 4 other locations, and I didn't stay there for longer than a year, so it was a lot of moving around. But the first time that I realized I need to live in a quiet space was my previous apartment. I lived on the first floor in an old building, and I could hear everything that my upstairs neighbors were doing, personal, private conversations they were having, their day-to-day, their dog bouncing the ball around or playing fetch inside. It was driving me insane. I'm not even kidding. My mental health was at an all-time low. My anxiety was just off the charts. Everything that you can think of wrong for an HSP in an apartment and in a living situation, that was my experience before this unit. I'm not going to talk about my previous experiences because that was probably my worst one. But in that moment, I realized I need to live in a top unit. I need to live in a quiet area. I need to have an aesthetic that's calming and peaceful for my soul, a place where I can just re-energize quietly by myself. So I got really lucky and I found this beautiful little bungalow, and I've been here for a few years now. I love it. I obviously won't be here forever, but I live in a neighborhood that, although it is close to Seattle, like downtown Seattle and all the big attractions of Seattle, I have access to my friends and my social life, but I also am able to retreat back home and just reset. If you are an HSP or you live with an HSP, the city you live in and the state and region that you live in is so important as well. Okay. Enough about living environment. Number 2, social justice, or connection to social justice. I've been plant-based for, 15 years now. I started vegetarian in 2009, vegan in 2015, and it was always because of animals. I learned a lot about our food system and factory farming and how inhumane and cruel it is to animals. And I've always felt a connection to the pets that I've had at home. My parents had birds, and I didn't particularly agree with that. I never felt like birds should be in a cage. I still don't. And if anything, I feel more strongly about that. But I grew up with a lot of animals at home. My parents were the type of people who, if there was like an abandoned dog or if there was a lost dog, we'd either try to find its home. We also took one and adopted it. It was always about helping animals, and that's just something that's always been near and dear to my heart. The clothes I wear, what I eat every day, the things I own do not have animal products on them. I didn't know that all of this was tied to me being a highly sensitive person, but it all makes sense now. It's all social justice related, and it hasn't only been with animals for me. If I see someone belittling someone or someone being harassed or attacked, I will be the first one to stand up to that. I will say that over the years, I've learned to not get involved because it would take so much of my energy. I remember I was walking with an ex-boyfriend, and there was this dog eating grass. The dog's back was hunched, and I could just tell it wasn't feeling very well. And the owner was just kind of sightseeing. His dog's eating grass, and he pulls it really hard, and he's just like being really mean. And I'm like, oh, excuse me, I think your dog isn't feeling well. Grass sometimes really helps them feel better. Because, side note, it will sometimes make them throw up. It isn't always bad that dogs do throw up after eating grass, because it allows them to kind of just release whatever is inside that's making them feel uncomfortable. Most people don't know that, and I get it. Point here is, one, it wasn't my business to step in. It wasn't like this man was harming the dog. He knows his dog better than any other person does. I'd say generally, standing up for what is right is something I'm proud of. I do wish that more people weren't afraid to speak up, especially in moments where it's not a dangerous situation. It's just something small. However, there are, again, downsides where I could cross a boundary and not realize that that boundary was not only crossed with the people that I've interacted with, but also with myself energetically, because it affects me. I feel like I need to speak up whenever someone does something that's rude, disrespectful, wrong, or at least I've always felt that way. Again, I've learned my boundaries now. I'm not perfect at it, but it's something that I'm working at, and I'm sure that other HSPs can relate. Number 3, depth of processing. I would say that depth of processing is maybe one of the greatest gifts of an HSP, because you're really able to understand others. If a partner is feeling sad or some intense emotion, HSPs are the first ones there to be able to empathize and understand and really have their partners feel supported and heard. We're also able to read the room, so we can notice when someone is feeling low, anxious, shy. But at the same time, we have to be careful with our own boundaries of how we react to other people's emotions and energies, because we can easily take them on, and that's not for us to do. Another piece with depth of processing is also feeling pain more intensely. And this kind of ties in a little bit with being an empath, though I will say an empath and an HSP are not the same, though often HSPs are empathic and empaths tend to be HSPs, but we're not going to talk about that right now. For example, for me, I got in a car accident in 2018, and my body has never been the same. I've been experiencing severe pain with my back, with my neck for many years now. The way that pain affects me, I believe, is heightened because of my HSP traits. HSPs, like I said, are overstimulated easily by sound, sensory, textures. Pain is also a sensory. So for me, when I feel pain, which is on a daily basis, there are many moments where I feel antsy, anxious, frustrated, overwhelmed, just overstimulated. And if I don't take care of myself, if I don't take the moment to either pause, take a break, lie down, stretch, reset, and someone else is around me or with me, whether that be a partner or a friend or any other loved one, I might react in a way that I wouldn't normally, in a way that they don't deserve, whether it is I react like aggressively, just frustrated, where they think that I'm mad at them, or they might think that I just can't control my emotions and I'm just overreacting. But really what I'm trying to say without saying is, ouch, I'm in pain. This hurts so bad. Can it stop? HSPs do feel, again, sensory and pain on a heightened level, and it's important that we take care of ourselves. And I'm very mindful of stretching and of going in the room and closing the door, but I'm not perfect at it. I actually, in another relationship, we were watching a movie, we're hanging out on the couch, but my back was killing me, but I also wanted to just spend quality time and cuddle with them. So I was having an internal battle between staying outside on the couch, enjoying my date night, but also I needed to step away and just lie horizontally and reset my back because it was killing me. So I go in the room and I'm just so frustrated. I'm angry, not at him, not at myself, at just the pain. And they're like, hey babe, I'm tired, I'm gonna go to sleep. And I reacted to that and I was like, why are you going to go to sleep? I'm tired too, but I decided to stay out here for you to watch this movie, and now you want to go to sleep, so you get to leave me here. And it just escalated, and he was really just confused. So he goes in the room, and we had just had a lovely date night, and he's someone who's just very communicative and wants to get to the bottom of an issue for the most part. So he starts asking me what's wrong, and I'm really frustrated and I don't want to talk about it. But internally, his pain is excruciating at this point, and I'm furious because I had stuck it through. And now he's just walking away and I'm here left with this pain. So we went to sleep angry, and the next day I was crying because I didn't know how to put my pain into words. So I ended up telling him that I was just in excruciating pain and I was projecting that pain, but it wasn't about him. And so I apologized. But that's an example of how, if you don't take care of yourself as an HSP and you're in pain, you can take it out on the people in your life, and it's not going to look good. It's not going to end well. And then you have to go and explain yourself. And someone who loves you will obviously take the time to understand your perspective, but it's important that they understand your HSP traits sooner than later. People who are HSPs tend to be sensitive to sensory stimuli, but those that are overly sensitive to light and touch and things like that isn't necessarily the same as HSP. That's actually called sensory processing disorder, which is what I think I also have. So right now, for instance, I have all of this natural light hitting my eyes, and even when it's artificial light hitting my eyes, I still feel very uncomfortable. This is for the sake of nice lighting, but I wear sunglasses inside a lot of the time. I wear sunglasses outside most of the time, if not all the time. It also smells. I'm also very sensitive to temperature, and most HSPs either don't feel very comfortable when it's too cold or if it's too hot. So you're more mindful of others too. For instance, whenever I'm in the car, I ask people, let me know if you're hot, let me know if you're too cold. And it's because I feel sensitivities to that, so I am mindful and want others to feel comfortable as well. Fabrics, textures are so important. So even how a book feels, for instance, this is such a specific example. There are laminated books, they're just a plastic laminated film on a book versus a more gritty texture. Gritty always wins. When I put on these pants this morning, I didn't have socks, and I was walking around doing my hair and just doing things in the apartment, and the edge of my pants was it wasn't actually, but it felt like it was chafing my leg, and I could not get that thought out of my head. Making coffee in the kitchen, in the bathroom, doing my hair, doing my face, I could not stop thinking about my pants chafing onto my ankle. So I went into my room and I put socks on, and then now they feel protected. But that's the point. It's oversensitivities like that HSPs experience on a daily basis. HSPs who are HSSs, which is a high sensation seeker. I am a high sensation seeker, and I'm a highly sensitive person. And we're not going to talk about HSS in depth in this video, but let me know if you want me to in another video. As a high sensation seeker, I am someone who's always either seeking an adventure or doing things that are either a bit more risky. There's different levels of high sensation seeker. There's like extreme sports, there's adventure. I like to explore new cities. I like to kind of go into like a dark alley by myself and just see what's in there, and when most people would be like, that's not safe. I like to travel alone. I love trying new foods. I am interested in different cultures and learning about them, art museums, parks, new scenery, newness, excitement, adventures, experiences. All of that is something that a high sensation seeker really loves doing. So when you're a high sensation seeker, HSS, and an HSP together, there is a tendency to get easily bored in a relationship, which has been my experience. But with partners who are not HSSs and are more either introverted or okay with being home more often or just doing the same thing every day, I tend to get really bored. And it gets even worse when they're not able to hold a conversation. I like introverts. I like their calm energy. But when I date one, I do get bored. And that's because I'm an HSS. And so it's important that they are people who can communicate well. So for instance, my most recent relationship experience, there was never a moment where I was bored with that person, and because of their life experiences and trauma, they were such an incredibly unique, gifted, fun, introspective, deep person, and that for me was so just fascinating. And in that short relationship, I probably had the most fun that I've had with most of my relationships. So it's interesting. Who is a better fit? Because I've dated non-HSPs and HSPs, and there's pros and cons to both, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Number 6, HSPs have really high expectations. This has been one of my yellow flags for myself, because I've always felt like if more people were just mindful and kind and cared about animals and nature and social justice and their impact on this earth and on others, that we would be a better world. But that is a very HSP perspective to have, and it took for me to realize that I need to accept people where they are at. We are all on our own journeys, and it took for a lot of mindfulness practice and meditation for me to accept that. I think it's called equanimity, where you just accept the good, the bad. Same with people, accepting them at where they are. We're not all going to have the same values and moral compasses. Not everyone is on their path to being vegan. Not everyone cares about social justice in the same way. Some people don't care about it at all. All of our brains are wired very differently. Again, an HSP, this is a genetic trait. This is something that we were born with. 15 to 20% of us were born with. The expectations that I've set on the people in my life and the people I've dated have always been really high, I think, and now I'm able to kind of understand that that's not realistic. I'm also not a perfect human by any means. When I first started my plant-based journey, I was really, really hurt by the fact that people did not care in the way that I did about animals. Fast forward to the last 3 years, and now I get it, and by no means feel that people should be vegan. I love dating people who are not vegan. I love listening to different perspectives. I also realize that now I've become more able to understand different political views. I may not agree with them, but I can understand and listen and hear them out without getting emotional, where I think that's still something that people struggle with. Noticing subtleties. I would say that this is a gift and a curse. Just as much as we can notice if someone is uncomfortable in a room and you know what to do to make them feel more at ease, you can also tend to either react or overanalyze a situation. And let me give you my example. I was at a dinner with my friends. We were all a bunch of girls, and I got to sit next to this one girl who, she greeted me nicely. I was whispering with my friend and we were giggling. And the girl, I looked at her face and she was like rolling her eyes. And I could tell she was irritated by the fact that we were talking while the performers were. And yes, I get it. That can be rude, but I promise you we were not being that loud. Maybe she's an HSP too, who knows? But it really triggered her. And then it happens again. And the girl's like, they're talking. She doesn't say it to us kindly. And that for me is not okay. Again, speaking to people respectfully, all of that is really important to me. So I confronted her in front of everyone at the table, which made everyone feel really uncomfortable. I told her, if you have a problem with me, you can just tell me. And she was like confused. But she was also confrontational as well. She was like, I don't have a problem with you, but now I do. My friends who I went to the dinner with were really uncomfortable. Rightfully so. I knew that I needed to remove myself. In that moment, it was me noticing a subtlety, which is her facial reaction, her demeanor. For me, it made me react, which in hindsight, and immediately after I knew that's not the way to handle these situations. Like, come on, Sandra, we're grown. But in that moment, it just was something I could not hold back. And I am pretty sure it's part of my HSP trait. When I notice people not speak up and someone's being mistreated or they're being mistreated and they don't defend themselves, I see that as a sign of weakness. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be a loved one, a stranger, anyone that I see that doesn't stand up for themselves or what they believe in. I just lose respect for them, and I do tend to see them in the dimmer light, which is an HSP trait. And I don't necessarily agree with my judgments, but I can't help but feel that way because, again, going back to like me being someone who stands up, I wish others did too. Super self-aware that is a yellow, maybe red flag of mine. But and another part about being an HSP is that I can tell when someone's lying. I can tell when someone's withholding information, lying, or just not being genuine. I don't point it out. It's something that I keep for myself, and I'm just more cautious with those people. I can just tell when someone's not being authentic, and I feel very confident in my ability to be able to tell and differentiate, and I'll just leave it at that. All right, so number 8, there are some real good career benefits of being an HSP in a professional setting. HSPs tend to show some really strong leadership traits. One, because of their depth in processing, so they're able to, be more intuitive, to understand people and situations and manage others' feelings, but also tasks. I've experienced that myself. I do thrive in leadership positions. I love mentoring and coaching and being a support to people who are earlier in their career or people who are struggling in their work. I'm also, and this may be due to my life experiences as well, but I've gone through a lot of, loss and having to start over, and that's just built a lot of character and made me more resilient. And so I'm able to understand when others either reach a low point or are experiencing a hard time. Because HSPs tend to have high processing abilities, we're able to see the risk before it even happens. So for instance, if you have a task or a goal that you need to meet, you're able as an HSP to identify the risks and challenges ahead of time. The way that your brain thinks bigger picture, it thinks from start to end, and you're able to identify, okay, so if we execute this plan, these are the people that need to be involved. If they're not involved, this is how they would react. We don't want them to react this way. We want everyone to be on board. So you tend to have higher influence, able to detect risks and challenges and get people on board and then execute and implement in a more impactful way. It is something that I've learned that I'm able to do. It's something that I've read. She covers it in this book as well. So it's definitely a plus side. The downside for an HSP in their career is that if we don't set boundaries, we can become very emotionally involved with our teams. So we can be impacted if they're stressed. We don't want them to feel stressed, so we feel bad, so we take on more of the workload. It's just a fine line, and you do need to protect your energy, and we need to make sure that our work doesn't become ourselves. I've worked in nonprofit for the last 5 years now, and as much as I care about the impact of the work, I think it wasn't until the last 2 years that I finally realized I am a good person at work, but work stays at work. Sorry, very redundant. It's just important that boundaries are set between an HSP and their meaningful, purposeful work. If the work is not meaningful, an HSP is likely to quit, to move on, to change careers because it does not fulfill them. And I can kind of relate to that. Again, I've been really lucky with my career where I've done things that really matter to me, but probably because I'm proactive in the way that if something doesn't feel true to me or true to my interests, then I just don't continue pursuing it. Number 9, self-care is so important for an HSP. I don't always get the best sleep, but I'm extremely mindful of my nutrition, of my fitness, on journaling, on reading, on quiet time, going out to nature walks. I go to the dog park religiously, and for me, the dog park is like a sanctuary. It's around animals. I'm able to reset and just be out in nature because Washington is gorgeous. If an HSP is not proactive with their self-care, they're likely to be overstimulated, be reactive, and project their frustrations, their physical pain, their tiredness onto others. We need to be so intentional with taking care of our mental health, our emotional well-being, and our physical health as well, because all of that is critical for us to be centered human beings. I would also include having like a clean space, a clean environment that feels airy for me personally helps. Again, you can kind of tell I'm into aesthetic. Like I use my TV screen to put some beautiful background while I'm working at home, some classical jazz music. All of that is self-care for me. Sets me up for success. It just makes me feel good about myself. Number 10, relationships. I mean, that's where this whole conversation stemmed from, right? Let's see. I mean, I shared some things about relationships already, and I guess all I can say is I wish I knew all of the things I know about being an HSP back then with all my previous relationships. I don't mean I regret not knowing because I couldn't have known, right? But I know that if HSPs could communicate exactly what our sensitivities are with our partners, we would be most likely to give everything we can to make sure that that relationship succeeds. And if it doesn't, then it just wasn't meant to be. When you don't know about your sensory sensitivities and all of that, and you just react, or you want alone time and are frustrated, and your partner doesn't know why, then it can create like a gap. Yeah, it's just a lot of learning. I think that calls for a different YouTube video also, because so much self-reflection. But I hope this was helpful. I hope that HSPs out there are watching this video. And if you are, write a comment. Or if you are in a relationship with someone that's an HSP, I want to hear about it. I just want to say, not all HSPs are the same. I only shared my experiences with you, some of the things that I learned from this book. Every one of us, again, has had different experiences growing up, positive, negative. All of that plays a part in who we become as adults. Well, I appreciate you all so much for listening and tuning in. I am gonna go be horizontal now.